Welcome back for steps 5 and 6, and this is where we'll finish up the case. The training will be delivered face-to-face with learning chunked by topics with awareness and knowledge objectives. A visual representation will be needed to lay out the course map sequence and to show the sponsor and stakeholders when requesting feedback. Knowing that topics may need to move around, what visual representation should I choose? I'll give you a moment to consider if you want to press S and pause or continue. And once again, I'll give you 3 seconds to decide if you want to pause here and make your selections. Continuing on, I will show you what my choice was. Mine is the storyboard, which is the graphic organizer, and I selected this because it is the one that it is identified as you can move things around, and I see that as one of the things that would need to be done in this course. The wireframe focuses on the structure, and things really can't be moved around, and it's associated with website design, which that hasn't been identified yet for this case. The prototype, this shows partial functionality of the end result. I haven't seen anything to indicate that we need to focus on that partial functionality or on the end result, so that's why I didn't select that one. And the mock-up looks finished and is not interactive. And I would anticipate that we're not ready for something that looks finished yet. Moving right on to step 6, and this is the last step. The sponsor and stakeholders have confirmed the story and sequence of the course. Multiple instructors will teach the course at several different sites. The sponsor wants to determine participants' learning by the end of the course. What learning assets should I develop? Give you a moment to consider, and moving on. And last time, I will give 3 seconds in case you want to pause and mark your answers. Continuing to my choices, I selected the middle 3. I selected the facilitator guide because of the multiple sites and multiple instructors and the way the facilitator guide is described as helping that consistency. The participant guide with job aids. I see this as needed since they will need to apply their knowledge back on the job. And then lastly, part of the case is that the sponsors wanted to be able to assess their knowledge at the end. The last 2 could be possibilities, but I don't see them as ones that are should be done. So those were my choices. And with that, that's the end of the case. That brings us to the end of the design, creating the course, and we already talked about the details to include for each objective. We talked about the components to include in each module, that it was important to identify the modality and the special equipment or technology that would be needed. And here we talked about creating a visual representation of the course map, that it would need to be done in some way, and selecting the learning assets to develop. If you are only following along with the case, then that's where we will end. If you want to hear a little bit more discussion about the last 2 things, the visual representation and the learning assets, stick with me. There were 4 ways discussed to visually represent a course, and the first one are mock-ups, which look finished but are not interactive, contrasted with prototypes, which represent the end result, but there's only partial functionality. And one of the ways that I have seen that is, say for example, one module or representative set of activities have functionality that can be, say for an e-learning, clicked on to have a sense of the end result, but not every activity and not the full learning. Wireframes are black and white, and they focus on the structure. So for example, the outline of a website design. And then lastly, the storyboard, which is a graphic organizer coming from movie scripts. And in this one, the graphics can be moved around, the story pieces can be moved around. The typical learning assets that were addressed are facilitator guides. Some of the things that they say facilitator guides should have are descriptive titles, visuals to support facilitation, and page numbers to match participants' guides. And there's other things that should be identified that facilitators need to know, things such as where visuals and slides and materials are, what timing should be, questions they should ask. The second thing that that could be or that are typical of as learning assets are participant guides and materials. They said that those should have descriptive titles and visuals, and that there's other things that could be included. Some suggestions are fillable worksheets, instruction cards, handouts for activities, assessments, and job aids. And evaluation materials all come back to the objectives. They should be an objective measure of success of those objectives, and they should be devised during the development phase. You can see that there's some things to also consider: slide development, and there were some key design suggestions for slide development, white space, visuals contributing to what's being taught, media choices, and adaptive learning. And as a summary, this is everything that we've looked at in this case, going from needs assessment, the outcomes and objectives, all the way through the design. And in the design phase, the course map would have been completed, and there'd be a visual representation that's ready to send the sponsors and stakeholders for final approval. And the way that this was discussed is some of those recommendations, say, of modality or instructional methods are suggestions, and then that's what the final approval would give the go-ahead to move on to development. Thanks for sticking with me.